the average online seller in the Philippines is quite digitally savvy. They are browsing things, they're watching tutorials, and we have very strong seller communities. Today, we keep more than 30 communities where sellers train each other. So I think our job is really to navigate the ecosystem and to help getting them together and growing, right?
Thought-provoking conversations with the people shaping our country. We uncover stories behind the headlines with influential voices from the Philippines and beyond. This is Manila Bulletin's The Sit Down.
Hi, this is Philip Kunhing and welcome to this new episode of The Sit Down. Today's topic is e-commerce here in the Philippines. It's basically an industry that represents almost about, I think now 24 billion pesos in terms of annual spend of online sales. But in fact, if you look at the total retail sales picture, it's less than 10% of total retail sales. So it's really a big, there's really big potential for growth in e-commerce. And today I have with me our tech editor, Ika Ontiveros Cheng, and she'll be introducing our guest. So Ika.
So we have with us today the CEO of Lazada Indonesia and the Philippines. We have Mr. Carlos Barrera. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the big picture, Carlos. Philippine e-commerce has grown enormously over the last 5 years. And obviously, if you think 5 years, it means it was during the health crisis, during the pandemic, it really spurred the growth. But now we're also seeing turbulence, right? There's platform competition, there's shifting consumer habits, there's regulatory scrutiny. From where you sit as the head of Lazada, is the industry still in a growth phase, or is there something more complex that has to be sort of discerned and understood?
Thank you. That's a very good reflection almost. The reality is that we're undergoing maturity. Right now, what's happening is we go from a very early stage, nascent economy into maturing. I think maturing doesn't mean that you stop growing, but definitely the big question now is whether the growth is sustainable and what's the real quality of that growth, right? So I've been here for 10 years. I've been with Lazada for more than 12 years. And I remember still very vividly the first years, it was all about growth at all costs. A lot of competition, a lot of startups, and everyone's trying to prove their model. But now the industry, as you were mentioning, is $24 billion. It's a very, very big size, mature industry that cuts across different verticals where we work very closely with regulator, and everything that we do is scrutinized because we're already big enough to impact everybody. We have tens of thousands of brands. We have tens of millions of consumers. So I think the question is not so much about growth. Definitely, if you look at the public data, we're still growing at double digit year over year as an industry. And there are certain verticals growing triple digit still. But it's more about what will be the quality of that growth and how can we make that growth sustainable, working with regulators and with the partners, right? At Lazada, we've been working with all regulatory authorities for more than 10 years. So we actually welcome that. We have a lot of engagements. We're meeting recently with FDA, BIR. We've been partnering with DTI for more than 10 years. And we take their input closely, right? We're very fortunate because we work with tens of thousands of brands and pretty much every single brand is with us. So they are compliant by default. But we also think we have a very strong responsibility to make everybody compliant because the reality is that we have hundreds of thousands of sellers, and we need to equip them, to train them, and to explain what it takes for them to be compliant and to move into the formal economy, right?
Okay.
Speaking of growth from like a global perspective, data shows that the Philippines is clocking in at around 17 billion in digital commerce. Against Indonesia's 82 billion and Vietnam pulling close behind despite the smaller population. So market penetration here is still lagging. Why is that gap still there? And do you see this as a problem or as an opportunity?
Well, the reality today is that Philippines is a very challenging country to operate because you have the logistics complexity of thousands of islands, and you also have a lot of difficulties around driving internet penetration first. So if you look at the broader digital ecosystem, that generally includes the main verticals of e-commerce, travel, deliveries, food deliveries, entertainment. So the advantage that Philippines has is that Filipinos are incredibly savvy. They're great with digital. They spend 10 hours a day on average online, which is what you will colloquially call the chronically online.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
permanently available.
She's guilty of that.
Guilty.
And honestly, they really know and understand worldwide trends. People speak English perfectly. They know what's going on in the world. They're very aware and they are demanding because they know what they want. So that's a great consumer for all the online platforms. The reality, though, is the gap between the online vision and the actual execution on the ground is quite challenging because you need the payment infrastructure, you need the logistics infrastructure, and you need to be able to deliver. We have hundreds of hubs all over the country to deliver. So I think the online penetration is catching up. And we see that we're converging with other markets, but we're a little bit later when it comes to the development, right? We started later. Indonesia had a lot of investments, a lot of local homegrown platforms, and now the market has consolidated. And I think Philippines is growing faster. The main question, though, is what would it take to really take it to the next level? And I think here there are two fundamental challenges that are there and that we have been working very hard to solve. One is payments. This is one of the few countries in the world where cash on delivery is still the main form of payment, right? And we've been working very hard over the years to drive both credit card penetration with our partners. We have more than 20 bank partners that really support. We have our own co-branded card with Union Bank, and we really focus on driving this. But the reality is that still not so many of our customers are bancarized, right? In a way, we are a bit more aspirational. We have a lot of high-value buyers that have banks, but in a buyer base of tens of millions, there aren't so many. We also work very closely with GCash. It's our sister company, also part of Alibaba Group. And we really support a lot of the online payment methods, wallets. This will be a game changer for the industry because cash just creates a lot of downward implications, failed deliveries, painful logistics ecosystem, right? And I think the second fundamental shift is really on logistics. You need very strong logistics, very good capillarity to be able to grow the industry. Today, if you leave Luzon and maybe a couple of the Visayas and Mindanao capitals, there's still not that much penetration of logistics services. So that makes it really extra hard to deliver the goods and to support, right?
We were talking about the digitization of commerce here in the Philippines. And actually, you mentioned a lot of facts which actually pertain to that question already, and you answered us. You answered it already. So my question, actually, if you want to take it on the sidebar note, is that you're talking about online presence, but I heard you don't have any social media accounts. Is that true?
I have some social media accounts to check,
Okay.
but I don't consume a lot of social media, or I don't produce a lot of social media.
So you're not very active yourself on social media.
I am active as an external observer, right?
He's just browsing.
But yeah,
Okay.
I try to minimize my time spent because we have to work so hard all the time, and I find it very distracting. I think it's very hard to control it.
No, I can imagine also if you were actually there on social media, almost anyone who shops in Lazada and has something to gripe about or complain would be reaching out to you.
I actually quite enjoy that. To be honest, I get about maybe like 10, 20 messages a week, which is good because we used to have hundreds, which means that our service is much better.
Better now.
But a lot of people reach out on LinkedIn or they will email me. I think my email is everywhere. Somehow people still post it. So I like it because I think getting that type of first-hand input is very important to understand, especially when something falls through the cracks. So we've had a few times where someone raised something and we made changes because it was a very good suggestion.
So you're okay with that?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
Okay, be careful what you wish for. Huh? They might start saying, hey, we can call Carlos.
So the competitive landscape has shifted dramatically. You now have TikTok shop. So you're just scrolling to TikTok and there's like ads already. So it's disrupting the traditional platform commerce. And there's already social selling through Facebook also. And this whole ecosystem of DTC brands. So do you think that this is good for the industry, or is it fragmenting the market in ways that hurt both buyers and sellers?
Well, I think this is a slightly different market. If you look at e-commerce, this is a worldwide trend. So the platforms have been maturing for quite some time, really focusing on the experience. We're part of Alibaba Group, so I spent quite a bit of time in China and Singapore learning a lot from them. This has happened all over the world. So you have the platforms that really preserve the buyer experience. We invest a lot on technology, brands, building the trust. If there's one thing we want to be known for, it's always trust. So it's a very different business model. And then you have the social selling and more of the live streaming, if I may. The challenge with this type of business is that it's a social media business that's suitable for more impulse buy categories. So you may buy like some affordable beauty or maybe some fast fashion. But when people are buying milk for their babies, where they're buying groceries or when they're buying high ticket items, they always rely on the platforms because they want to make sure that they're buying from the official store, from the trusted sellers. So our focus is on last mall, on our brands, on supporting the brands. And the reality is that we don't see social commerce as a competitor. In fact, it just helps enlarging the pie. To your point, we're actually welcoming any new entrants because the reality is that in a market like Philippines where only 10% of the sales are happening online, what we need to be thinking about is how do we get everybody online to reach 35 or 40% like it will be in other markets like Korea or America or 50% in China, right? So we are here. We've been here for the last 14 years. Will be our birthday tomorrow.
Happy birthday!
Thank
14
you.
years. Wow.
We're here long term and we think that ultimately e-commerce will go through a lot of disruption phases. Right now, social commerce is already a reality. Now we're starting to talk about the AI commerce. So it's just part of the industry evolution and we're happy that everybody is investing in this market, right? You were mentioning TikTok. We're actually partners for many areas of our business. We invest together. We have a lot of marketing activities together. So I think for certain areas there will be competition. For certain areas we'll cooperate. But what matters is really making e-commerce bigger.
Okay. Some analysts describe the current e-commerce race, in quotation mark, as a race to the bottom. No? So you've touched on that a little bit in your previous answer, but maybe for the viewers, you can explain better exactly what that race to the bottom means and whether it really involves subsidizing sellers, burning cash on discounts, and competing on price rather than value.
Yeah, I think the race to the bottom phenomena is not new. It's been happening for centuries. If you look at the initial American capitalism, there were a lot of industries where they were raised to the bottom. You look at manufacturing, you look at a lot of the business models around digital, internet. What's very interesting about e-commerce and in general about tech models is that you need scale. So one of the reasons why people are always tempted to invest so much or to raise each other is because scale is very important to drive strength. One of the reasons why we're able to offer very strong deals, very good promotions, free shipping, a lot of the unbeatable prices is because we have the scale. If you look at a basket, we have more than 100 million products in the Philippines. And if you look at a basket of goods, we're always the cheapest on average versus any alternatives. And one of the reasons why we're able to do that is because we have the scale to really bring down the cost, right? That said, I think from a macroeconomic perspective, the question is valid and it's a very interesting phenomena. If you look at, even especially in China, there are a lot of discussions around involution, right? A lot of the competition and the way to support the buyers. I think the broader trend is not necessarily race to the bottom, is really the technology-enabled competition to do more, to deliver better, and to reach higher value. So when I look at it now, I think there are two separate components. One is definitely for Southeast Asian markets and especially Philippines, for the longest time, the platforms have been investing very heavily and in many cases losing money to grow that market, right? So there are very famous examples like Amazon took 15 years to turn on a profit. And for the longest time, it felt like the more they sold, the more they lost, right? And that's part of the scale component and the business. But I think the second component that's important to understand is because we have an ecosystem. We have our payments business, we have the logistics business. We really create an end-to-end ecosystem with our creators, with affiliates. It may look like we're investing very heavily or too heavily, but when you look at each of the pieces, each of them are a sustainable and significant business long-term. So while there is a lot of competition and there's been a lot of competition across verticals, I think what matters is that you see, and internally we track it, the quality of the business, the quality of the earnings, the retention that you have of the creators, of the sellers are getting much, much better, and you will be able to monetize more over time. I think it's not a secret. For the past few years, the cost of doing business online has also been increasing because the brands and the sellers realize that today e-commerce is a significant part of their sales. And to your point earlier, there are a lot of direct to consumer. Basically, direct to consumer really means that they don't even have much physical presence, right? So for these platforms, we can be up to 60, 70, 80% of the sales of many of these brands. So they feel that the value is there. They see the return on investment when they invest and they're willing to pay more. So I think more than a race to the bottom is there's a very strong competition because the market is worth it. But while this is happening, you have to keep in mind that the market is growing. So a race to the bottom normally has that implication that people are fighting for the same pie.
Spot,
Yeah.
yeah.
But what we're seeing is that the pie is growing and everybody's supporting and we are all growing. So there's also that perception that, well, it's a very tough market, but as we compete, we're all getting better as well. So I actually enjoy it. I take it as a challenge.
Okay.
I really like how you described everything like as an ecosystem. So from the creators to the sellers, and we even talked about your delivery hub. So I think I'll keep that in mind. It's a very good input. So Lazada has gone through a public period of restructuring, so leadership changes, workforce reductions. It's been a strategic pivot. Without getting into internal details, what does that tell us about the broader pressures and established platforms are under right now?
Well, I think the broader question is what is the impact of technology on organizations, right? If I look at it today, the reality is that as a company, we're very effective, we're very efficient, and we focus a lot on implementing technology, right? We did have some company changes a couple of years back, but when you look at the way technology is transforming how we work, the productivity gains, the changes, and the way that organizations are reshaping is tremendous, right? I think what's important to keep in mind now is all over the world, companies are adjusting through the usage of technology, through the implementation of a lot of the tools like AI. When I look at our productivity, I mean, we have even a lot of our account managers, a lot of the people that we're hiring. We're a very young company. The average age is 26. We have really, really young people, but through technology and they're very driven, they're very digitally savvy, they all manage millions of dollars. So the level of productivity and the capacity are just exploding, right? So I don't think it's really about the reorganization or restructuring. It's more about the way that technology has allowed us to do so much. And because we're growing and the business is doing well, we don't necessarily focus too much on the restructuring or any of the adjustments. We had a one-time adjustment, but it's more, how can we do more? And how can we now empower people to do more? So when I look at the impact of AI, we have implemented AI throughout our business. We are able to do anything from adjusting a product description, the tagging, the automatically uploading using a phone and identifying everything, AI chat assistant real time. So I think we're a very lean company, and we're not planning any changes. But what is important to see is that because of technology, there's just so much productivity that we generate, right? And that's what enables us to handle the growth levels without necessarily expanding too much our footprint, right?
A huge hero aspect of the storyline of Lazada is how it's been helping Filipino MSMEs. No? E-commerce promised to be like the great equalizer, giving a small vendor in Pampanga the same equal footing as like a brand that's in a mall or whatever. No? Do you feel that promise has been really kept? And what are the pressures that sort of like make that something that can be either something enhanced or something that will deteriorate in the future?
I think that's a very important question. And I always ask myself this because the reality is that as the industry matured, we saw a lot of the traditional brands benefiting a lot from online, right? But what we saw, especially during the very early stages of adoption, is that the growth was really powered by D2C, by digitally native entrepreneurs. I remember my first 3-4 years here, I was every day in Binondo, in Caloocan, in Baclaran, spending time with people that they had a very small shop and 90% of the sales were going online. Now, to be honest, today, the industry is very, very large. We estimate that depending on the public data, we discuss a lot with DTI and we have some studies, depending on how you factor this in, e-commerce is about 1.5 to 2 million jobs, direct jobs. And there are hundreds of thousands of businesses. So that is a reality, and that has really happened and developed. And to be honest, many of the successful entrepreneurs are coming from those first innings, and they have matured. I think the question is, how do we help all these businesses upskilling? So we had a very good partnership with DTI where we committed to register any seller that did more than 3 million pesos a year, pay for their taxes, pay for their support to become a registered entrepreneur. And just on that program alone, we graduated tens of thousands of businesses. So we have seen many of them upskilling. But I think what's interesting now is that as all the traditional brands use online and they start to go very deep into e-commerce and to compete, we have seen that some of the entrepreneurs are having a harder time keeping up. So while we have hundreds of thousands of sellers, what we always try to prioritize and we always think is, how do we help the small guy grow? We even have this Alibaba trailer, the power of small. How do you really help the smaller one? Because I think the smaller entrepreneurs have the drive and have the flexibility, right? So today, I still see that many of the entrepreneurs are thriving, but we did see that some of the initial MSMEs that started 2, 3, 4 years ago dropped. And what they do now is, instead of treating it as a main platform, they use it as a second source of income. They basically realize that it's very challenging, it's time consuming, they have to do a lot of work. And they made the decision, okay, I don't want to pursue this as a full-time business. I want to use it as a source of income. So that's also okay with us. And the reality is that we also see a lot of people that are taking it as a second salary. They make 20,000 pesos a month reselling some items. So that's also good. But the part that I'm very proud of is that we see amazing businesses. There are more than 3,000 businesses that do they're in the Millionaires Club. They do millions online with us, and they're all homegrown entrepreneurs, right? A lot of very young people, a lot of first generation. And I think that's beautiful.
For the startups, though, what would be the process? Just for the people who are watching, what would be the process for them to be able to get accredited and be sold on Lazada?
It's very fast. I mean, we simplify the whole journey so that people can directly go online. So they take a picture of their ID and their paperwork, the requirements, upload it directly, and then they can start selling that on the spot within minutes. Then they can quickly use their phone to set up their shop and upload their products, and then add a bank account or a wallet, and they can start selling within 30 minutes. What we do, we are quite compliant. So what we do is we monitor the registration, we review all the FDA details. We're always following the regulation. So we allow people to create their shops, but before going live and fully selling, we always validate all the requirements, right? So all in all, people start selling in days. And what we try to do as much as possible for all these entrepreneurs is we help them with new seller packages. So we have carved out millions of dollars worth of investment so that every small seller gets a little bit of support with some vouchers, some credit store to start setting up their businesses.
It's important that you mentioned, they still need to be compliant, because there are a lot of scams already around. So we have that. So it's good that there's compliance, you're still following compliance, and there's also a package that helps them get started. So
we are quite compliant, as I was mentioning. Of course, we're totally compliant, but our thinking is we're quite focused on this because our idea is that buyers trust us. Yes. If you look at the number one immediate word that comes to mind for every Lazada buyer is trust. So it's not just that we follow all the requirements, that the minute that they upload everything, our AI is constantly scanning and screening for any potential fakes or any items. We can scout and say, okay, this is a beauty item. It needs to ask for FDA approval, or it needs to ask for groceries. So what we do is not just the reactive, but also the proactive of screening every item to make sure that the details and that the documents are verified.
So platforms have introduced AI-driven analytics. We've been talking about AI for quite a bit. There's also logistics integration, seller financing, but adoption among the small merchants is still reportedly low. Is the technology outpacing the capacity of the people that it's meant to serve? And also from a logistics standpoint, you mentioned that it's still logistics is still a problem because we have a lot of islands. So how much of e-commerce ceiling is actually a logistics and infrastructure ceiling?
Well, I think first of all, people are much better using technology than what everyone expects. I've been here for 10 years and I can tell you every time someone explained to me why it was not going to work or people wouldn't understand, they were wrong because the reality is that the average online seller in the Philippines is quite digitally savvy. They are browsing things, they're watching tutorials, and we have very strong seller communities. Today, we keep more than 30 communities where sellers train each other. So I think our job is really to navigate the ecosystem and to help getting them together and growing, right? So there's a lot of peer-to-peer training that works very well. Yes, some of the AI tools are not fully maximized, but especially around payments and around real cost-saving initiatives like today, most of our sellers are using the AI tools to update their catalog, their images that they are uploading. And we see many businesses where 2 or 3 people are running a $3-4 million business, right? I was just with a partner yesterday, and they're doing 50 million pesos, a team of 4 people. And that's just possible because of the understanding of technology and the way that they use it, right? So I think maybe MSMEs are not fully adopting all the tools, but definitely the tools with very clear value proposition and those, especially AI-related use cases, Philippines ranks quite high. So it's very, very strong. I think ultimately what matters about these tools is what's the benefit for them and what's the use case, right? We have been investing quite a lot to drive these trainings. We have our Lazada University, and then we help upskilling everybody. But my view is as long as you share the tools, people will always find a way. I believe also on the logistics side, it's been very challenging for us. I remember 10 years ago, there was a typhoon. Things were not even digitalized. We were running on most of the logistics partners that were working with us were running on paper sheets, on run sheets, and we couldn't even understand what was happening. We had many incidents where we lost 100,000 parcels, 200,000 parcels, and we had to protect the buyer because our standard is no matter what happens, we'll take care of you, we'll pay you, you'll get your money back, and then we investigate. So it was just so hard to run a business because we couldn't even track. And that's why we set up Lazada Logistics. That's why we started investing, because we realized we had to support the ecosystem by developing a real solution, fully enabled, fully online, empower through technology everyone up to the rider, right? So after maybe 2-3 years, we started to see more companies coming here, more third-party logistics companies coming. And now the market is quite mature. There are a lot of players that are thriving. The challenge, though, is there are, let's say, maybe 10 online or logistics companies, delivery companies, even pretty advanced operators, but it's generally very focused on the main areas because the country is so complex, not just the islands, but also the level of capillarity that you need is very high. If you look at Lazada, pretty much everybody has our app installed, and we have tens of millions of buyers every week. So we want to service them. And there are some areas that may not even work financially, but we still want to do it. So we cover 99.99% of the country. And sometimes I'm traveling, it's funny. You go to certain areas in Palawan or certain areas in Negros, and people rely on us. So for us, it's not a financial decision. We have to be there because those are the buyers that we're cultivating for the future. And eventually, we know that with the current growth, the capillarity will be enough to service them without losing money, right? So the difficulty on that is that it's hard to find partners that want to go to all these provinces. So many times we have to do it, and we have to support the ecosystem, and we have to finance certain areas for logistics ecosystem to develop, right? So there are some of these cases where we basically have to do it ourselves, and you have to support some of the local partners and some of the enablers to really continue fulfilling that service. But the reality is that still majority of the volume is very focused on Luzon and some of the key areas, main cities, tier 1, tier 2 in Visayas and Mindanao. So it's more about balancing where all the volume is versus supporting all the buyers that still rely on you, right?
Okay. On the regulatory side, you were mentioning the collaborations that you do, for example, with DTI, no? But is regulation catching up to the industry, or is it the other way around? What do you feel still needs to be done to help sort of level up and increase scale?
I think regulation has been catching up a lot. To be honest, we've been working very closely with all the stakeholders the Internet Transactions Act was passed a few months back, 18 months almost, but it really set a lot of the regulatory policies for the industry. And honestly, the fact that there's an Internet Transactions Act that delineates a lot of the responsibilities and where we engage very closely with DTI, with DOTR, with even with all the different stakeholders is quite advanced, and there have been a lot of good things pioneered. I think the challenge that we have now is more on how to train and how to upskill everybody, because what we still see is that the general mindset around regulatory concerns is the small business owners are scared. So in their mind is they prefer not to look at that side. And when we notify and we have the policies and we put it in the seller center, to be honest, some of them always feel intimidated, and some of them even decide to go for some of the social commerce or some platforms that are very lenient, right? So it really represents a problem for us because we always follow this and we always educate them. And but some sellers tell us is, oh, Lazada is so formal, so serious. And it creates that perception that we're overly compliant or that we're very tough. But the reality is that we're also working with all the government bodies to support, right? Last year, there was a very big BIR push to register all the businesses, to go online. I think that was also quite important to pioneer, because what you want is that all the online businesses also understand how withholding tax works, how to also not just register, but also how they can deduct certain items that are important for them. So there's been a lot of support and a lot of growth recently. I think the areas where we still need a little bit more help is definitely first on training. We do a lot of training, we do a lot of support, and the reality is that most people still don't have the strong enough understanding, right? Definitely connectivity. We see that in certain provinces, many of our sellers struggle to really operate well because the connectivity is not strong enough, right? And to this point, it's funny, one of our top sellers online, still Starlink, Globe, PLDT, they sell a lot of devices with us because they're growing also and they're improving. So we see that it's getting better. And frankly, over the last 10 years, it has improved drastically, but it is still a challenge for a lot of the mass adoption. And then I think the last area where we can also continue to get more support is on financing. I think Philippines still struggles a lot when it comes to financing for sellers. Particularly, it's very hard to get non-asset-backed loans. So a lot of our sellers keep telling us that they cannot fully grow online because they don't have access to credit, right? But the way our business works, you need to buy ahead. Right now, we're hosting our birthday campaign tomorrow. Some people will sell maybe 1 month worth of sales in one day. They need to be able to stock up and they need to do some form of revenue-based financing or more dynamic financing. So I think financing has hurt the market quite a lot because it just creates a lot of friction. We have been working with a lot of partners. We have good partnerships with GCash, with Maya, with GoTime, where we help some of these sellers, but it's still a big challenge. And I think even nationwide, there are some government initiatives to support. We've worked with a lot of the government bodies that support with certain small business loans, but it's still probably the least penetrated country in Southeast Asia when it comes to that type of real financing, and not just financing, but overall revenue base or more credit financing where people can borrow at a better rate, because it's a combination of high rates, of course, high defaults, and then the fact that people tell us, now that I'm big, some of the entrepreneurs that become very big, I have to borrow against my warehouse or I have to borrow against my home. Is that real pain of feeling the risk and constantly to level up, you have to take on more risk is very, very challenging.
So we've been talking about the Philippine landscape. So let's go outside. So cross-border e-commerce is a sensitive topic, and there's pressure on government to protect the local sellers from heavily subsidized foreign goods, particularly from China. So where do you stand on how that should be managed?
Well, this is a worldwide topic, right? If you look at America, Europe, there have been a lot of changes, both in the treatment of the de minimis and the treatment of import goods, right? Philippines has always been a fairly open country. And I think the reality is that people still leverage this as one of the ways for balikbayans and for many of the OFWs to ship items home, right? So the first step is to really level the playing field and understand how a lot of the items are and the supply chains are working here, right? To be honest, we rely a lot on the local brands and sellers. So our partners are all the last mall trusted brands that have strong presence here. But even these Filipino companies are sourcing a lot of items from China, right? So my experience is that this perception of China goods as low cost or subsidized is not entirely true, because they have already been able to move up the supply chain and to integrate very advanced components. And even a lot of the local partners are sourcing from China, right? We do have a good cross-border business. Of course, being part of Alibaba, we have a big cross-border business worldwide, right? And to be honest, some of the biggest businesses we're running in the Philippines are not coming from China. They come from Korea, where we own a platform, G Market. Filipinos love K-pop, they
Korean
love
goods,
Korean
yeah.
goods, they love K-beauty. So the cross-border shipments are not necessarily coming from China. A lot of it is really Japanese products, Korean products, right? But we've always followed the law. We've always worked with the regulator to discuss what the landscape will look like, right? And I think what's important here is always very clear definition of the roadmap and what will happen. For example, there are certain restrictions on importing electronic items. And what we saw is that a lot of the electronic brands, they decided to really come here and to set up shop, right? What we see is over the past 4 or 5 years, a lot of the Chinese cross-border sellers actually came to the Philippines. They built their operation and they invested a lot to set up shop, because the cross-border business is not that scalable either, right? People tend to think that cross-border is unfair competition, but the cost of shipping is quite high. The complexities around logistics, customs, and the end-to-end journey are very high. So my experience is that most of the successful sellers, particularly Chinese sellers that are 2 hours away, the main supply chain sources in China, of course it varies, but are generally in Guangdong province or very near, 2-3 hours away. They actually take the risk to come here to set up shop and to invest. And it's been a big source of investment in the country. So I don't think the cross-border imports are a big challenge for this country. And ultimately, because to really do well online, you need to know marketing, you need to know how to tackle the buyers, you need to understand the local nuances. And Philippines is a very unique country. I think over time, what we will see is that many of the cross-border flows will actually shift to permanent Philippine incorporation, right?
Going back to AI, so AI is being deployed across the e-commerce value chain, personalization, inventory, fraud detection. We talked about that. Where is AI moving the needle now? And is it more hype than reality?
Well, I think AI is moving the needle everywhere. I have to be honest, sometimes I'm even working using AI and I even question myself. It's like, it's so good that sometimes when I ask for help on something, they answer the way I would, or it's sometimes even better. They give me perspective. So I don't see AI as hype. I think what can be discussed is the hype around AI. A lot of the very high capital expenditures, a lot of the very high valuations because of AI. People are forecasting this very idealistic.
A lot of investment. Yeah.
That we can discuss, right? Whether that capex will make sense or the implications this has on energy supply and a lot of the upstream physical limitations of AI, right? The compute, and we have seen a lot of the impact of this on cost of memory, cost of memory cards, cost of computer processing. It's becoming very hard to even afford a lot of these things, right? But the reality is that AI is changing everything. I think about AI basically like a third industrial revolution. If you look at online, there was the web 1.0 with the early 90s and 2000s. And then we had the advent of app technology, all the consumer apps, web maybe like 2.0. And now we're really going through the AI technology. But it's a very foundational industry because AI touches everything. If I can share with you today, we probably have more than 200 use cases for AI today. From seller side, people are saving millions of dollars every day on trade, customs requirements, product descriptions, financing. Everything is fully automated. Before, it will take you months to prepare an application. Today, AI can do it for you in seconds, right? But on the buyer side, I think it's very transformational because it enables full personalization. If you look at our app, it's fully personalized. Nobody sees the same thing. None of us will see the same thing because it automatically predicts what you want to see. And we have an AI Lassie Chat, our AI advisor, that's literally taking your inputs and giving you suggestions. You can ask, I have dinner tonight with my wife, what should I do? And then it will give you a recommendation. Tomorrow is Father's Day, what should I buy? So I think it transforms everything. The big question now is what that means for all the different industries, because as you start to see AI automating many aspects of the development chain, of coding, of customer support, it also frees up a lot of time to be spent on other much higher value items, right? So I really see it as a big transformational event that can help everybody reach their full potential and can help us grow into much higher productive type of activities, right?
But from the consumer standpoint, there's also people who will talk about the dark side of AI, right? And then talk about whether it's actually helping consumers become addicted to the shopping apps, whether it's consumer manipulation. Do you feel there's a need to self-regulate sometimes on this, or is this something that you're basically saying, hey, it's laissez-faire, and this is what the commerce, the new face of commerce should look like?
I think the reality today is that regulation is also catching up with AI. It's a very nascent industry, so there has been less and less regulation over time, but the reality is that now it has been intensifying. The fact that there was less regulation on AI is just a function of the technology curve because it developed so fast, right? If you look at the technology waves, it took 6 to 8 years for Facebook and the social media apps to reach 1 billion users, right? But today AI took a year, right? So it's just so early that there was significantly less regulation on the AI side than on other technology industries, but now it's front and center, and I think it's a very important discussion across the board, right? For us, our view is AI is really part of the foundational technology of business today, and I think the broader debate around AI is really across all the different verticals, right? How will AI be used from a government perspective, from a country perspective, because it's a tool that can enable anything from energy to hospitals and health tech to customer support to weapons, right? On the e-commerce side, it drives some more convenience. It helps on processes, but I think it's not one of the most disrupted areas, right? So we're kind of on the later stage of discussions and implementation. The reality is most of the AI products that we have are connected to the same use case. So it's more of continuous improvement and evaluation. But I think especially on regulation, and you brought up some points on consumer addiction or how to spend time, what we do always is we focus on personalization and experience, but what we want is to help making your experience easier and making it easier to find the things that you want, but the time spent is not that high. People come, they browse, they find what they want. We're a shopping destination, right? So the time spent is very targeted. I think the bigger question, the bigger challenge will be around entertainment, right? A lot of the deep fakes, a lot of the AI, where people spend hours and hours, and even some of the results that people get when they interact with AI that may not be so monitored, right? AI still has a lot of hallucinations. So there is a valid debate around many of these topics, right?
Yeah, you almost wish there was an AI that would detect fake news, right? Since the Filipinos are very susceptible to fake news.
So it's Lazada's birthday tomorrow, but looking 5 to 10 years out, what does the Philippine e-commerce ecosystem look like? Do platforms as we know them today still exist in the same form, do you think? Or does something fundamentally different emerge?
I think the beauty of e-commerce is that it tackles certain needs that don't change. Everybody wants to get their items delivered as fast as possible, right? We've been investing so hard and really focusing on what it takes for people to receive their item in 48 hours. Today, Filipinos receive their items in 48 hours guaranteed in 95% of the country. And that took us years of perfecting the whole process. And AI will only make it easier or better to sort, to arrange, and to provide the journey. But people will always want that. I think e-commerce will constantly transform. For example, content. The apps will have a lot more content, will have a lot more details, reviews, better looking products, but the fundamental will still be the same, right? I believe there are a lot of waves impacting e-commerce. When you look at how we were browsing 10 years ago, how we were buying, it was desktop, mostly using search. Now we're buying through an assistant. It's almost like how you're a personal shopper, right? So we will definitely go into that agentic wave, right? We're seeing a lot of the agentic ecosystem becoming much, much more meaningful. But I think the platforms will still be here. And I think what this will enable is a much more relevant experience. So end to end, from payments, from logistics to personalization, we're seeing today you can talk to the chat advisor and quickly ask, I have oily skin, what would be the best treatment? I have a 12-year-old, they're studying what are the books that I need to get, and it will give you very, very important data. So for me, it's the journey is always towards more personalized, more relevant, saving more time, saving more money. And we are actually very happy to have AI to be able to do this, right? Today, we invest hundreds of millions of dollars on promotions. We help, for example, we have a meal guarantee program where every mom can go, all the milk is authentic, 100% guaranteed, and every mom can go and redeem their voucher and have a better experience. AI will even anticipate and will help you even predicting based on your experience, you may be pregnant. These are some of the recommendations, but that will only make it even more meaningful and more helpful and better cost. So I think we spend a lot of time thinking about what will change, but many things will not change, and we will be able to improve using technology.
Yeah, there's that joke, that the app will even know you're pregnant before your husband knows, right? But what do you think is a wave that people should really look forward to within the next 12 months, for example? Something that isn't around now and that will be a wave that they can foresee in the near future that will really change the way they shop?
I think the chat advisors, we have our Lassie chat, and the consumer connection with the chat advisors is really transformational, because you start to use the tool to anticipate other things and to help you saving money. If you start to ask how to optimize your finances, for example, it will tell you, you can buy your century tuna on payday and save 5%. And this is how you have to plan your daily budget. One of the realities of e-commerce in the Philippines is that people are not buying that much. So the average Chinese consumer comes to any of the stores. They use Tmall and Taobao 5 to 10 times a week, and they come into their favorite stores twice or thrice a month. Today in the Philippines, buyers will come once a week, and then they will go into their favorite shops maybe once a month. But now with these assistants and with this chat technology, you can basically go into your Lassie chat and ask them, I want to spend 10,000 pesos. What would be the best way for me to maximize the household expenses? I'll tell you, you can buy Century Tuna on payday. You can buy the diapers on the 15th because there's this Pampers brand day.
Okay.
So it will really transform the level of savings and the level of planning around the shopping experience.
You mentioned diapers, and I hear you have a 10-month-old son. So how much of the shopping for your son has been coursed to Lazada?
Everything. I try to test everything. Yeah.
Okay.
And to be honest, it also made me appreciate a lot of things we've been building, like the meal guarantee, the mother and baby stores that we have, the partners, because I really don't have to worry when I buy on Lazada. And I think that's a very unique proposition in the e-commerce world, where I remember when I arrived here, nobody really knew if they were going to get what they were ordering or they couldn't trust. Now that feeling that everything is authentic, everything is from our top partners. And I also love to buy different things for him, because the moment you're part of this mother and baby club, you get every time like a new toy, a new thing, baby Einstein, all these development things. So it's
But
really,
you said mother and baby club, but you're the one doing the shopping.
I like to experience.
Have to try it out. So, Filipino consumers versus Filipino sellers, who's been better served by the digital commerce boom so far?
I have to say, the real experience that you have today in the Philippines, it's world-class. Definitely at the beginning of e-commerce growth, sellers were better served than buyers, because the sellers were very scarce resource, right? I remember when I first came here, we had 1,000 sellers, and they will dictate the market. We had to work so much with them and really take care of them. But as the sellers grew a lot and the market matured, now it is a buyer market. And we center all our decisions around buyer experience, buyer investment, and we work with the sellers as a platform. We always train the sellers and work with them to support those buyer needs and those buyer demands. So I think today is by far the buyers, because the level of prices, support, the delivery experience, and the quality of the journey and the discounts is second to none. It's really super efficient. So we're always obsessed with this. And now that we deliver in 48 hours, we're asking ourselves, how do we get to same day delivery? And even our brands are pushing us, okay, you need to now figure out with the AI advisor how to improve so that they can try the lipstick. We have a pilot now where people can try the lipstick using artificial reality. So there's really a lot of pressure for us to maximize the buyer experience and to take it to the next level. But I think over the years, the buyer experience has been improving significantly.
You also have Indonesia as part of your territory that you're handling, no? What for you are the big differences between the Filipino consumer and the Indonesian consumer? Or what surprises you about the Filipino consumer to this day?
It's quite different. I've been here for 12 years and I work in different markets. Filipino consumers are very, very international. They love global brands. They really care a lot about newness. When we run a lot of the brand days and events, we're known for last mall. We are literally an online mall and we have all these exclusives, these bundles. When we launch all these campaigns and people come to the site, they really anticipate and wait and they plan everything around the next new thing. They're very willing to try and they're very open to new trends, very digitally savvy. So I think Filipinos are very connected to the world. And there's that very strong demand for experiences, for new things. So when we look at the market across different countries in Southeast Asia, Philippines is a market where you have very strong international brands, very unique patterns with very localized trends, and a lot of newness and experiencing. Filipino buyers are much less loyal to a brand. They're willing to try.
Much less loyal.
They're
Yes.
very willing to experiment.
Not
So
faithful.
they're
Okay.
less loyal to a brand
Just like the
because they're
husband.
really willing to try.
So if you could say one thing directly to a small Filipino entrepreneur, the small guy, deciding right now whether to go all in on e-commerce, because you mentioned, some people will just do it as like a sideline, what would it be?
Well, for me, it's all about the potential. You have to really ride this wave. When people offer you a ticket to in Elon Musk's SpaceX, you don't ask where it is, right? You just come on board. And I think you have to hop on board because the industry has been here for 15 years. The reality is that we're only scratching the surface. And there's so much opportunity for everybody. It's much easier than it seems. And you have to be part of it one way or another.
Every time we do a sit-down episode, and we're closing now, we always ask our guests, if you were the one conducting your own sit-down, who would you like to interview as your first guest? Carlos.
I would
Anyone.
love, personally, I would love to interview Elon Musk.
Elon
I think
Musk.
it's a very polarizing figure. It will be very, very interesting.
Okay. Okay, so thank you very much, Carlos, for
Thank you.
having this sit-down episode with us.